Welcome to We Need to Talk about tech, where we talk about the past,
present, and future
of technology.
On this week's episode of the podcast, we're talking about the Samsung Galaxy S22 event and some new Samsung chip news.
We're talking about the Apple App Store selling knockoff apps, and both customers and developers are getting upset about it.
And we're talking about whether or not a new Blackberry is still incoming. All right. So our first topic of this podcast is the Samsung Galaxy S22 and its potential Unpacked event that is rumored to be happening in early February, the first week of February, actually. And there's a couple of things that we might see here. One of them we've already talked about in the past podcast, including a brand new Galaxy S22 series, which may include regular S22, S22 Plus, and an S22 Ultra that may also come with an S Pen, which could be interesting. But another interesting thing about this Unpacked event is Samsung is also working on a new chip. We've talked about this in the podcast in the past. Samsung has been working on their Exynos chip line, which they have been using on their phones overseas, mainly in Europe. But there has been rumors in the past that they may switch over from Qualcomm and the Snapdragon line to their own Exynos chips. Now, it isn't happening for the S22, and actually the reasoning behind that is because their Exynos chip has been delayed, and this chip is known as the Exynos 2200. And normally what would happen then is we would have the Snapdragon chips in North America, and then in other markets, Samsung would use their own chips. Now, it seems like maybe this year it might be Snapdragon all the way across the board, and we may see this Exynos 2200 chip debut in another phone later on. Which makes this interesting, is this will be the first time in a long time that Samsung will not be using their Exynos chip overseas, but also it brings into question why this chip was delayed. So like in previous podcasts, we have talked about Samsung does want to switch their phones across the board to Exynos chips in North America and around the world. The rumors behind why this chip might to have been delayed is because of the GPU. It's apparently using AMD RDNA 2 kind of architecture for its GPU, which interestingly is the same kind of architecture that's used in the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, as well as the Valve Steam Deck. But the issue is that apparently the GPU is causing overheating issues, and Samsung needs to kind of dial that in before they can actually release this chip for wide use, which is why it probably won't debut in the S22 line of phones. Now, that being said, despite the fact that the chip is getting delayed, there are still signs that Samsung might want to introduce it in this Unpacked event, which could be interesting to see. They're going to be announcing phones that don't have the chip in it, so it would be weird for them to announce that, but that is the rumors right now, that they do stand to announce a chip with the phones. My question to you is, how do you feel about Samsung developing its own chip? Are you excited by the idea that there could be a GPU that's using the same architecture as the PS5 and the Xbox and the Steam Deck? And also, do you think it's smart for Samsung to announce a mobile chip that isn't included in their current phones?
I don't think it would be smart for them to announce the chip if it isn't coming out in their flagship phones.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we're kind of in a strange position too, because, us being in North America, we never get the Exynos branded or the Exynos, powered phones anyways. So to us, it wouldn't really make a difference. I feel like it's more the global market that would say, hey, wait a minute, these always have Exynos in them. Why do they have Snapdragons now? So, I mean, like from our perspective, I don't think it's that big of a deal if they don't launch this Exynos chip anyways, because, I mean, we wouldn't be getting it. Most of the reviews that are based out of North America wouldn't be getting the Exynos version either. So it's kind of like, it wouldn't change too much for us. I mean, just for the company at large, it would be nice to see them, able to launch it with their flagship phone. Because as we've talked about in the past, it's developing a chip for your own product, for your own phone, for your own whatever it is. It makes your integration that much better, that much easier, right? It's that much better marketing wise. it's so much better for the company producing the product and the chip that for Samsung's sake, I think it would be nice for them to do. But the fact that they aren't launching it, or it doesn't seem like they're going to launch it with the Exynos, definitely not a deal breaker. I think really what it's going to come down to is, okay, what kind of design are they going with? What kind of features are they going with? And I guess also, price. I hate to always bring it back to price, but there's kind of rumors that every one of these S22 phones is going to be $100 more than their S21 counterparts. And I think part of why the S21s were so, I don't know, so well received is for what you were getting for them, they were pretty reasonably priced. They're not Pixel level priced, but they definitely weren't iPhone level priced. Unless you went with the S21 Ultra, then, well, yeah, that's the best phone that they offer. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of features they package into their new phones. And like you said, maybe every phone comes with an S Pen, which kind of would warrant the extra $100 being tacked onto everything.
Yeah, I think you're right. If it does come with the S Pen packed in, that would be really cool. And also, the big talk around the S Pen is with the S22 Ultra, which that's great and all. But one cool thing about the Note 10 series was that they had two sizes. They had the large size that was, standard. Usually the Note is a big phone, but then they also had a smaller version. They continued that in with the Note 20, but unfortunately the smaller version was way overpriced and it wasn't as good a phone as the rest of the lineup. But if they can actually bring that to not just what they did last year with supporting the S Pen, but also having the S Pen in the package, that could be great. That being said, it might just be a situation where they all support the S Pen. The curious thing though about the Exynos 2200, in the past, a long, long time ago, Samsung's Exynos chips were actually better than the competition. And a lot of people preferred to have that chip in their phones. That has changed. In recent years, countries that got the Exynos chip were kind of upset that they didn't get the Snapdragon because generally the Snapdragon had better performance. Now, could this be another change of the guard where we see the Exynos chip kind of leapfrog Snapdragon? Well, we don't really know. The GPU performance is going to be interesting to see, specifically because it's going to be using the RDNA 2 architecture, but there has been some benchmarks that have leaked, quote unquote. Who knows if they actually leaked or if they were supposedly put out there. But it was comparing the Exynos 2200 to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, I think it's called. Yeah, Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. And the interesting thing is the Exynos 2200 actually beats the 8 Gen 1 on multi-core performance, but is worse on single core. So, I mean, there could be a situation where the Exynos chip is better than the Snapdragon in certain use cases and maybe a little bit worse in others. But this is a similar conversation that we had when Google introduced the Tensor chip, where in some applications it was actually faster than the Snapdragon chip, and in others it was actually slower. But what really got the Pixel to do really well was its value proposition. I think you brought up a good point. If Samsung does eventually come up with these new chips, but maybe in the S23 series, but doesn't have the value proposition to show that, even if the performance is only a little bit better, there's another reason to get the Exynos chip as opposed to the tried and true Snapdragon. It could be a hard sell for a lot of people. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what they actually show. And like we said, this is planned to happen on February 8th, I believe. And the idea is that later that month, S22 series will actually go on sale. Now, like you said, I think it's smart. What you said is absolutely right. It doesn't really make much sense to show the Exynos chip at that conference if it's not going to appear on any phones around the world that's going to be announced at that Unpacked event. So yeah, it remains to be seen whether or not they actually show it at the February 8th event. But also, expect that the phones will go for pre-order on February 9th. That's the rumors. and that they will actually ship towards the end of the month. So yeah, it could be interesting to see what Samsung actually does.
Would you be interested in an S21 phone with an S Pen? Like, let's say just a regular size phone with an S Pen, or do you think because it's supposed to be, a more productivity focused device, do you need the bigger screen like you would get from a Note or even a S22 Ultra?
So I really like the S Pen, but I think what you said there at the end is absolutely right. Even the big size Note phones, I don't really see the draw for me. First, personally, I don't like big phones. But even if I did, the S Pen on any size phone, if it's a phone, it's not enough room personally for me for S Pen to be that useful.
Mhm.
But that being said, I use a S Pen. I'm using it right now. I use it pretty much every day on my tablet, which I think is a perfect use case. And it's on a budget tablet. It's on the Galaxy S6 Lite. It's a cheap tablet. So the S Pen doesn't need to be on expensive devices for it to be useful. Now, what you said is 100% right. I don't think it's all that useful on a smaller phone. I would much rather take the dollar savings than have the S Pen. That being said, it probably looks good on a spec sheet if you're trying to sell it, at a Verizon or something. Someone walks into a store. The idea that it can support an S Pen is probably a bigger selling point than, oh, it's $100 off if you bought it outright. Um,
Mhm.
but I think you brought up a good point there, because there is also another rumor that this S Pen on this line might be the best performance that we've seen on an S Pen on the Galaxy S series yet, because it's apparently going to use the same tech that is in the Galaxy Z Fold 3, which has the lowest latency of any S Pen that we've seen yet. So yeah, maybe that's what's driving up the cost, is they're taking that tech from the Galaxy Z Fold 3 and bringing it to the main Galaxy S line. But how about you? Like, do you have any interest in using a stylus type device, an S Pen on a phone? And would you like to see it on other phones, so maybe iPhone or Pixel in the future?
I'd have to agree with you. I don't think it would be as useful on a phone.
Hmm.
I mean, a tablet definitely useful, but a phone not as much. And I would kind of agree with you. I don't like, or I'm not used to large size phones. Like a 6 inch, 6.1, 6.2, somewhere around there. That's a good size phone for me. Bigger than that, it's kind of now it's more of a hassle to use than anything.
Hmm.
So if I have a stylus, I would want it to be for a bigger screen, more real estate, as opposed to a phone. Now, if we're trying to, if I have to use it with a phone, I definitely like the sort of the S Pen silo that the notes typically have and that these new S22s are rumored to have,
Yeah.
as opposed to, okay, just a random S Pen floating around in my pocket, or I have to get a separate case to hold the S Pen. Yeah, I definitely like how the note does it. If I had to choose a phone with a stylus, it would be, the typical note way of housing a stylus. But I would much rather have a stylus for a bigger screen like a tablet like yourself
Yeah.
than I would on a just a larger phone.
Yeah, I completely agree. And our second topic of the day is actually an App Store knockoff. So I don't know if many people have heard about this, but there's this really popular app right now, or it's not even an app, a really popular game right now called Wordle. And it's essentially like a word based puzzle game that's available in the browser. And you can play it for free. It's free to play. But it's become so popular that a bunch of people out there have developed clones of this game and put them in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store and have charged a large amount of money for them. One example I'm seeing here, I'm actually referencing a CBC article that one of the cloned games that have been made is selling in the App Store for $29.99. And obviously, a lot of people are getting upset when they pay all this money for this game and realize, one, this isn't the game that they were looking for, because the game isn't actually on the App Store. It's available in the browser. But two, that the game was free to play to begin with, and they didn't need to spend the $30. So it's kind of like this interesting conversation we had earlier last year around Apple talking about how the App Store is like this perfect garden, walled garden of like
Mm.
hey, we are going to
of protection and
exactly.
privacy and
Exactly. And that's what, developers are paying for with their 30%. And, they need to have all that control on the App Store, and companies like Epic and stuff like that can't take that power away from them because that will negatively affect their customers. Well, Apple still has a lot of control in the App Store and customers are still getting upset. That being said, I don't necessarily think this is Apple's fault, but I do think it's kind of interesting the kind of story how it's played out here. That customers are really feeling ripped off. But I'm curious, have you heard about this story? And what do you think is like the appropriate response for Apple? Should they be refunding people? Should these games be removed? Or should developers be allowed to make clones of games like this?
it's a very tricky situation. Um, so the original Wordle game, if I recall correctly, it was made on the web. It was
Yeah.
a web game. It wasn't an app. And the person who designed it, their last name was Wordle, so
Yeah.
they just named it Wordle. But he made this fun, kind of puzzly word scramble game. He developed it for the web, and he was focused on making it for the web and giving everyone access to it. I'll try and find the quote now, but his words are pretty much Apple's App Store method is almost punishing people who build for web first, because I'm not worried about monetizing. I'm not worried about, this or copyrights. I'm just trying to create a game that is fun for people to use. And I didn't think I had to worry about copyrighting it on the App Store. And then the perspective of the person who made the app, or one of the people who made the cloned apps, was, hey, this is a game that everyone loves. It's not on the App Store. I'm going to put it on the App Store because why not? Everyone loves this game. Everyone wants to play it. Maybe not everyone knows how to play it on the website somewhere. So I'm going to make it easy for people to play. And then probably one person did it and someone else thought the same thing, either after seeing them or maybe they thought at the same time, hey, this is just free game. No one's capitalizing on it. I'm not copying anyone because there is no app. So let me charge $20 for it. And then they start kind of trickling out. So I can kind of see both sides of it. But I guess that's kind of the thing. The world that we live in right now, anything can be copied, right?
Yeah.
Especially digitally. Especially if you put something on the internet, it can be copied. If you put something on the internet, it doesn't belong to you anymore. You have to kind of assume that, right? So if you are building a free game, build it for the App Store. Build it for some sort of App Store. So at least you have some sort of stake to say, hey, I was here first on this date. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I definitely feel bad for the original creator. I wish they got some, let's see, royalties from it. But it's also, you can't blame the person who didn't originally create it. Because, okay, let's say they never made the app for the App Store. Someone else would have made it.
Yeah.
This original creator never would have made it. So it's, hey, there's an opening for a game. There is a demand. There is no supply. So I'm going to meet the supply. I might overcharge for it. It should be free, but I'm going to meet the supply, right? And so I don't think anyone should get their money back. If you paid for it, you paid for it. You should have known better. But yeah, it's kind of the economy that we're in right now.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because it brings up a couple of conversations. One, obviously, what is the ownership that the original creator of Wordle has on this concept of game? Is it patented? Is it copywritten to the point where he could potentially ask for takedown notices from the App Store? Because if they're cloning that version of the game that he has, rights over, they would essentially have to maybe license that from him in order to make it. Whether or not that is the case remains to be seen. Who knows? But it also brings up the conversation of, and this is something that was talked about in the Apple versus Epic trials of, and even with xCloud, when Apple decided that Microsoft couldn't have xCloud in the App Store and they decided to go through the browser. But Apple really restricts the capabilities of web apps, and the ability to place an icon for a web app right on your home screen. Now, I think that's starting to change, or that has changed, but it definitely has like a culture in iOS where if you want an app, you have to go through the App Store. And I think a lot of Apple customers and Android customers as well, because this is also an issue on Android, not just on the Apple App Store, but uh, we're trained to, oh, okay, there's a cool new app, I'm gonna search it in the App Store, as opposed to, oh, there's a cool new game, I'm gonna go to Safari or I'm gonna go to Chrome and search it up. That's really not the case for most people, and I can't blame a lot of the people who, like, obviously if I saw the game selling for $29.99, I wouldn't buy it myself, but I can't blame
Hmm.
for the immediate reaction to search the app store for the game, because we're just trained to do that, right? And I think that was a big thing when Epic brought the lawsuit up against Google, because even though you could still get Fortnite and the Epic launcher outside of Google by side loading the APK, their argument was customers are trained to go to the app store, and they're trained that that's the only place to trust to get an app. And, Apple's the same way. They talk about how the App Store is supposed to be a trustworthy place. So if customers believe that these app stores are the only place that they can get an app safely, it might be, a little bit difficult to convince someone to say, hey, go to a web browser and play this game, or go to the web browser and download a web app, or not even download, but just put an icon to a web app on your home screen so that every time you want to play it, you just press that and it will open up Safari to the right page, and it will look just like a native app. That's something that has not been really transparent on iOS in the past, or on Android. It's a little bit better on Android, but still not that transparent. So yeah, I can't blame a lot of people. That being said, I agree with you. Maybe refunds shouldn't be. I mean, Apple is probably going to start processing refunds, and they've already announced that they've taken down some of the apps that have showed up on the App Store, especially because there's a lot of them. Some of them are a little bit predatory, maybe not even delivering the game, but just saying, Wordle. I've seen this in the past where you look for an app, when Fortnite disappeared, and a lot of people would make Fortnite looking apps, but just ended up being like a strategy guide or something like that, and charging like $3 for it. So yeah, that can
Hmm.
absolutely happen. So yeah, this this is a little bit of a funny one, but I think it's a cool story to bring back the conversation of, what app stores are doing, and are they really as safe as the companies make them out to see?
Yeah, definitely interesting way to look at it. While we're on the topic of app stores, PUBG also recently, I guess they decided to sue Apple and Google for not removing a clone of one of their games. So, Player Unknown's Battleground, PUBG.
Mm,
So they're one of the first games, I would say, that I know of at least, that kind of started the whole battle royale style of gameplay where, you have 100 people or something on a map, and then they slowly kind of take each other out until there's one winner left. There's a game called Free Fire Game by Garing Online. They also have another game called Free Fire Max, and these are clones. They're like legitimately clones of PUBG. Not, oh, they copy the battle royale style, or they copied the I don't know, the character design. This is the same, let's say, island that you drop on. Buildings are in the same locations. The buildings look the same. The characters look the same. Even when you open up your menus, everything is exactly the same. And it's a carbon copy of the app. And just a couple numbers from, or one number from it. In the first 3 months of 2021, this copycat game generated more than $100 million in revenue with 100 million downloads. So it's not, not Wordle. There isn't a version on the App Store. So someone decides to make a version and they decide to make money off of it. This is a well known, successful game that someone just legitimately carbon copied and decided to make money off of it. $100 million in revenue off of it. And
jeez.
PUBG is also looking to sue YouTube because YouTube is hosting, people streaming, or maybe people post highlights of the game saying, "Hey, this is a copy of a game. This is copyright infringement," and you're pretty much promoting it, right? They're promoting it, and there's also apparently a live action movie of this Free Fire game that is also on YouTube. So I would say not to say that the Wordle clones were completely innocent. I would say I could kind of like see their side of it too. This is just complete robbery, to the point where they may actually. I mean, I don't know PUBG's numbers, but like this is such a robbery. They could be more successful than PUBG. They have a live action movie. I never heard of a PUBG live action movie, but I say this is the opposite end of it's a free market.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because I think we were talking a while ago about Tencent and like their gaming division kind of like growing and becoming huge, and I'm pretty sure PUBG Mobile is a part of that. I can't be entirely sure, but I think it is. Yeah, it is. Division of Tencent Games, which is interesting because I remember about 3 years ago, back in 2019, Tencent got in some trouble for making a mobile clone of Overwatch, and they were putting that on a bunch of platforms because obviously Overwatch was a super popular game, still is, but there was no mobile version of it. So I find that really interesting. Of like, they started by making clones of games, and they only released those games in particular markets where they knew they could get away with it. Like they couldn't release that in North America; they'd get sued. But it's funny how they put in that practice, made a bunch of money, like we talked about in previous podcasts. Make the most money out of any video game publisher right now, even more than Activision Blizzard, which was crazy. But also now they're getting hit with that, with people making clones of their games. So it's kind of like this big circular kind of situation and it just goes to show the app stores are kind of the Wild West. As much as Google and Apple, want to build this narrative that they're the safe place to get apps, the reality is they're kind of the Wild West, especially in markets outside of North America, which is just funny to see.
Yeah, definitely funny to see. It's tough for people to get in, it seems like, right? But then there's all kinds of these clone apps and copycat apps, and it's definitely an interesting story, or a lot of interesting stories, I guess.
All right, and our final topic today is actually about Blackberry. I think we may have brought up Blackberry once or twice on this podcast in the past. One of the times that we brought it up was the idea that a company was going to come in and take the Blackberry name, the license that was previously held by TCL, and develop a new 5G phone with a full QWERTY keyboard and the iconic Blackberry kind of form factor and design. Now, this phone was supposed to come out early 2021. And we talked about it on the podcast of, whether or not we would have thought it was going to be an interesting idea, whether or not people were going to gravitate towards it. But it is early 2022, and that phone still doesn't exist. Well, apparently it's been delayed. And not only has it been delayed, I mean, it felt like it probably wasn't going to come at all, like it was just going to get canceled. But the makers of this phone, Onward Mobility, has confirmed that they are still working on this phone. It's just delayed, but they are still going to fully release it. And, who knows what the reason could be. It could be the chip shortage. It could be maybe, they really have canceled the phone and they just don't want to say it yet. But, the reality is BlackBerry doesn't make phones anymore. BlackBerry's kind of dead. They sold off a lot of their patents. The personnel that they had that used to develop these phones doesn't exist anymore. And for a long time, the BlackBerry phones we've seen have been made by other companies like TCL. They have not been made by BlackBerry proper. So the idea that there's still, and those phones honestly were not successful. Some of them were really cool. Like, I personally really liked the BlackBerry Passport. I still think that that's one of the coolest phones ever made. But
I know people that still use that.
It's such a cool phone.
Multiple people still use it.
It's funny you bring that up because I was actually looking on eBay the other day to actually buy one. Because I was like, you know what? This is because it's just such a unique phone that it's just something I would like to have as like a history of some of the coolest phones. Another one like that, just go a little bit off topic, would be the LG Wing, the phone that
Hmm.
I think we talked about on the podcast. Not the smartest idea, but for some reason I just really like it. I think it's really cool. But anyways, yeah. So whether or not we do see another BlackBerry remains to be seen. I kind of hope we do. And this Onward Mobility company, I believe, is based out of Canada, which is also the country that BlackBerry is based out of. So that could be kind of a cool dynamic there. But I'm curious, do you think we will ever see another BlackBerry phone be successful? And also, we've talked about in the past, is BlackBerry dead? Is it done? Are we done with BlackBerry? Should they just move on? Well, they already have moved on, but should everyone else move on and
Hmm.
realize that BlackBerry's actually gone?
I I don't know. I think BlackBerry can be successful, but I mean, I guess it really just depends on who they're targeting.
Hmm.
I think from what I've seen, BlackBerry has in the past has been an enterprise phone, right? A lot of businesses, a lot of corporate entities use Blackberries, partly for how secure they've been in the past.
Yeah.
It seems like, from what I've read, it seems like this new version of the BlackBerry, or whatever it's going to end up being called, they're targeting enterprises, they're targeting corporate entities. They could be successful at that, but I mean, the thing is, I, I think we mentioned this on our last podcast, right? When at the very end we were talking about laptops and what do we need to see from a laptop manufacturer and blah blah
Hmm.
blah. Just, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need a flashy phone with a cool swivel that, or 12 cameras on the back and it shoots in 3D and it'll take you into the metaverse. Just like a phone with a good screen and a decent camera, and just make it not be laggy. I mean, I'm saying all this stuff like, oh yeah, this is super simple, I can do it. No, I we definitely couldn't make a phone ourselves, right? But like, the criteria for what people need on a phone is not that high, I would say. And I mean, some of the renders, it has a BlackBerry keyboard, which is part of why it's using the name BlackBerry, because people hear BlackBerry, they think it's going to have a good keyboard. So
Yeah.
you kind of need to deliver the good keyboard. And I think there's also, like, they have the patent to use the BlackBerry keyboard too. I think that's part of it.
Hmm.
So I think it could be good for, if it's targeting, the enterprise individuals. I think it could be good. I think it could be easy to be good for that. But I mean, part of, I don't know. I think it could be good. I would like to see BlackBerry be successful.
Hmm.
I don't think it's ever going to get to the heights that it was before, because everybody had a BlackBerry. But I think if they just say, okay, we're going to focus on, corporations, and giving them secure phones that are easy for them to use, I think they could be successful at that. And yeah.
I I completely agree with you. So a couple things. One, the keyboard. My question to you is, what is your opinions on the BlackBerry keyboard? I personally, the old 9900, one of my favorite phones of all time. I love that keyboard, and I actually miss physical keyboards. I thought it was really cool. I personally type faster on a touchscreen, but I feel like it's more accurate on the physical keyboard. First question, do you miss the keyboard? Would you ever buy a phone with a physical keyboard again?
Yes, I would. But it would have to be like a sliding keyboard. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
do you remember, like, the T-Mobile sidekicks? Like
Yes.
that kind of keyboard, not a keyboard just under
Under
a
a lot of
screen, because then that takes away from my screen real estate, and I don't want a super tall phone. But if it was a regular size phone, and then it could like slide up or swivel up, and then there's a keyboard, a QWERTY keyboard underneath, I'd take that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then the other thing is, you're 100% right. What BlackBerry's bread and butter was back in the day was enterprise phones. And I was working in IT around this time when there was a big switchover from when everybody had to use a BlackBerry at work to when iPhones were allowed. And the moment iPhones were allowed, no one wanted BlackBerries anymore because they had choice. And I remember that switch over of everyone now getting an iPhone at work because they could. The one key thing though is what BlackBerry was really good at was the narrative around security. BlackBerry Messenger was big back in that day. Well, guess what? iMessage has taken up that conversation. Also, with Apple's new VPN service, which has been in the news lately, that's also a big part of how Apple has built iOS around security. We talked about the App Store. There is a narrative that BlackBerry used to have that now exists with iPhones. But I think you're 100% right. A BlackBerry could be successful if they do things like, okay, we're gonna have a really good keyboard, and maybe it's gonna be a slide out keyboard so that you don't lose your touchscreen real estate or your screen real estate. But also, maybe it comes bundled with VPN access so that all of your traffic and stuff like that is encrypted with this narrative around security, because that can be a differentiating factor besides just the keyboard. And I would personally be interested in that phone specifically just for the keyboard. Me personally, though, I would be fine if they just took the BlackBerry Passport and put some new chips in it and re-released it. I'd buy that in a second. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they can pull this off. The company Onward Mobility has been very silent regarding the BlackBerry phone. So I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe never see it, considering that it's already a year late. But, I agree with you. I do want to see BlackBerry phones be successful again. We're at a point where LG doesn't exist anymore. More, obviously, Huawei is gone. More competition in the cell phone market would be great. We're the competition podcast. We talked about it a lot. And a name like BlackBerry could potentially shake things up if the phone is good.
Yeah, that's a big if.
Yeah.
So I guess your dream phone, I guess let's say not even dream phone, let's say your dream device. Is it a BlackBerry with a keyboard, a BlackBerry phone with a keyboard and a headphone jack?
Yes.
And a micro SD card reader, or a BlackBerry Passport with a stylus, let's say, but no headphone jack, no micro SD card slot for whatever reason?
Definitely the first one. And honestly, it's funny. I would love to see a hybrid between a BlackBerry phone and the Microsoft Surface Duo. I think that could be. I don't know if anyone remembers, but when Microsoft announced the Surface Duo, they also announced a product called the Surface Neo, which was a bigger kind of tablet phone that came with a keyboard that you put over the screen, and the software would automatically adjust so that there was a little touch bar above the keyboard and then a full screen, almost like a laptop. I would love for there to be something like that with a Duo where there's like a BlackBerry keyboard that could flip up on one of the screens, and then you get a little bit touch bar above the keyboard and then a full screen. Because personally, right now, if it had a headphone jack and an SD card slot, to me the Duo, and obviously it wasn't buggy, to me the Duo would be the absolute perfect phone. But also it comes down to price, right? I don't think right now BlackBerry could release a phone that is the price of an iPhone. And if Onward Mobility thinks that that's what they're going to make, there's no way that can be successful, in my opinion. I don't know.
No.
But I'm curious, like, what would you need for BlackBerry to make a phone that could make you switch to them? What is like 1, 2, or maybe 3 features that they would have to have?
I don't think there's a possibility, at least with this first iteration, that they can make a phone that I would switch to. At least this first one. Like, it would, okay, we're talking perfect scenario. It would have to be, let's say, 6-inch, 6-inch display, AMOLED, or no, LTPO, 120 hertz, like 5,000 milliamp hour battery. We need to have, like I said, the slide up screen so you have a full keyboard, headphone jack, micro SD, all that. let's throw stylus in there. But the thing that is always gonna thing that's gonna be, I guess, tricky is they have no ecosystem.
Yeah.
When BlackBerry was out before, the ecosystem wasn't a thing. It was you had a phone and they were a smartphone and there weren't a lot of smartphones. But now everyone's making smartphones. So what really differentiates how successful you are is what your ecosystem is,
Yeah.
right? Like everyone knows about the Apple ecosystem. Google is starting to build out their ecosystem. I guess technically BlackBerry could be part of that since it's supposed to be running Android. So they could start pairing with, Samsung watches, and they could start pairing with Chromebooks and Microsoft laptops. They could start working into that ecosystem. But in terms of like just the device, I guess like a large enough screen, a good enough processor that, let's say I want to play games on it. Say I want to play Pokemon Unite on it. I could do that. A full keyboard, headphone jack. I guess really a decent camera.
Yeah.
That's
That's
really
a good
it.
one. I didn't even think of that.
That's kind of the biggest thing, right? The screen, how it functions day to day, and the camera. I guess those are really the three things that you need. And then hopefully it's at a reasonable price. I guess, yeah. Screen, functions well, good camera. That's really all I would need. But it'd have to be like such a ridiculously reasonable price. Like we would have to have Pixel A series types of prices with a Snapdragon like 8 Gen 1 chip for me to be like, oh wow, I have to get this phone now. But other than that, it's like, why?
I think that's the perfect question, right? Like, and I hope that if there is a new BlackBerry that comes out, we're not the target market for it, right? Like there are people who love Blackberries and like you said, who will hold on to a Blackberry because there are no new versions of it. Target them first, but then also you got to make it a niche product. Like you got to do things like play up security for people who really care about security, or play up, I don't know, what Pixel did is they played up the camera, right? And it worked for some people, didn't work for others. Some people still prefer the iPhone camera, but they picked their niche and they picked their target of what they wanted to go for, and everything else took a back seat. I feel like BlackBerry probably has to do that as well, and do that in a market that no one else is really targeting right now. Cameras are saturated. There's good cameras everywhere. Like we said, I don't think they can make a really expensive phone and expect to compete. They got to go budget, so they got to pick one thing that's really important, knock it out of the park, and then hopefully people will flock to it and then slowly grow from there. But
I think this first iteration, they need to, like, it has to be security and battery life.
Yeah,
I'd say those two. I mean, performance as in like you can't be buggy on day-to-day stuff. It doesn't need to run games. You don't need to be able to edit videos on it. Just security, battery life, and make it work smooth, and target enterprise, target corporate companies. And then if you can get into that way, then you start working into people's families after that. But you have to successfully go, okay, after corporate. So you can get into people's homes somehow, right?
Or even like small business. Like, hey, this is a cheap phone that you can give to your employees because you're a small business. You can't afford to give everyone iPhones. I don't know. Let me know if this sounds crazy, but what if it's a feature phone? What if it's not running Android? What if it's a phone that has like one of those really, lightweight OSs like the old school LGs and stuff used to have, but has all the functionality of it has a full-fledged web browser that works. It has all of the basic apps that come with everyone's phone available on it, but because it's not a smartphone running Android, it can have a battery life that can last 4 days like old phones used to. Do you think that's something that they could get away with, or are we past that point where feature phones could definitely not exist anymore?
They better sell that for $50. There's no way they could get that into people's hands. Not a chance.
Yeah, well,
I mean, like, even if you just think of if you think of just how people's lives function, right? Like you need a browser, you need internet, you need some sort of direct messaging. TikTok. Well, not even that, right? Like if you think, okay, this is a business, I need to communicate with people. I probably already have a Slack channel. I probably have like a Gmail that I need easy access to. True. If it's not running Android or, you know, some, I don't know what other certified software, you can't get just those simple communication apps, which would be kind of, you know, hamstringing your business unless they're really trying to bring back BlackBerry Messenger, then maybe they can do it, but it needs to be somewhat smart of a device, somewhat of a smart device.
True. Maybe the middle ground there is then Android One, the lightweight version of Android. Because I think you're right. If they do release a phone that has crazy battery life, which is hard to do with modern day smartphones, that could be a huge selling point. That's something that a lot of people, they're putting big batteries in phones, but really battery life is still a 1 day on all phones. If they can release a new BlackBerry,
it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it is, right? Like remember when iPhones used to have like a 2300 milliamp hour battery, and now they have batteries that are way larger. But I guess because screens are bigger and stuff like that, and the processors are more power hungry. But if they could release a phone that could last 3-4 days on a charge because it's running a lightweight version of Android, that could be really cool too, along with having a keyboard and having really tightened down security and a good price so that, corporations and companies can give them to their employees for a relatively reasonable cost. Maybe that's a route for BlackBerry becoming relevant again, but still, I think you're right. It's kind of a long shot.
Yeah, definitely a long shot. I mean, hopefully they can pull it off. Once again, it's something we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. We'll wait and see.
Take it easy, everyone in podcast land.
Catch you in the next episode.